Hello, everyone. We have an incredible guest today. Pete Chronis and I have known each other for decades. I'll just say decades. How about that? A really long time. We worked together a really long time ago, and we've kept in touch. And Pete is incredible. He has been a chief security officer. He's now advising startups. He's creating frameworks around AI and security. And so we get to learn about all of that. And Pete, welcome.
Thanks, Vicky. It's great to see you. It's like a little reunion for us.
Yeah, it really is. It's amazing. So tell me what you've been up to lately around AI and security. I see a lot of incredible work you've been doing on LinkedIn as well. So fill us in.
Yeah, thanks, Vicky. I really appreciate that. So, look, I retired from CISO life after 25 years, and maybe about 6 months ago. And I've been working to advise other CISOs. I've been working to help startups as they go to market. And then I also joined the board of a data security company called Cyera, which is one of the fastest growing data security companies. It's one of the fastest growing security companies on the planet right now. So it's been an honor and a privilege to join their board of directors and to also help them kind of grow and expand their reach.
That's pretty amazing. I talk to customers all the time, large enterprises, and their number one question is like, we're getting a lot of pressure to protect our artificial intelligence, whether it's chatbots, internal or external. Tell us what Akamai, for example, is doing around that. But I was wondering what you're actually creating, what kind of frameworks you're working on that might actually help companies think about the approach there.
Yeah, look, I think a lot of companies, and you probably run into this too. A lot of companies are struggling trying to understand and appreciate what AI is, what it means to their enterprise, and then try to understand what to do about it. So I think the last year or so, I probably talked to, it's like you, right? We're in front of people all the time. So I probably talked to 250 security practitioners. So, and most everybody is struggling trying to figure out what, from an AI ecosystem, what do we have already? How do I build some governance around our ecosystem? And then how do I figure out how to evolve and protect it? And then more importantly, as AI evolves from kind of assistive to decisive processes, how do I protect it, right? How do I ensure the integrity? How do we make sure we build trust into it? So how do we understand? How do we defend? How do we trust AI across the ecosystem? So that's what most people are focused on, and that's where I've spent most of my time trying to help people understand the options that are available to them, and then try to help them understand how to build, kind of programmatic capabilities to help protect their enterprises.
So talk me through some of that. I mean, we've heard about OWASP top 10 for AI as kind of being a guideline that we should be thinking about in terms of jailbreaks, prompt injection attacks, and others. What are you kind of seeing from framework perspective, but also just practically? Is this a huge risk? What do you advise these 200 plus customers that you've talked to?
Yeah, look, I think if you look at the NIST CSF, just in general, the cybersecurity framework, it really starts with try to understand what you've got, understand your kind of ecosystem, understand how to protect and detect, these anomalies in the ecosystem, how to respond and how to recover. I think if you're looking for good frameworks that help cover kind of each of those elements of the ecosystem, the NIST AI risk management framework, the Cloud Security Alliance's AI controls matrix are like very holistic across those kind of ecosystems. And those are good kind of elements. So those are good places to start. I think the OWASP community and MITRE are focused on, developmental, like if you are an AI developer, or if you're a data scientist, certainly cybersecurity practitioners, but they're very developer centric,
Yeah.
architecture centric. I don't know. And so those add different dimensions. No matter what you do, what I recommend people to do is to understand and appreciate, your data security posture as part of your revamped AI security framework. And a couple of years before I retired, I started working on building a modern kind of risk management data security program in my last company. And I didn't realize this at the time, but you can't really have good AI security in your ecosystem. You can't build trust in AI without a good kind of foundation of data security. And you know this from the time you and I met until just a few years ago. I think the best people could do is encrypt data and manage access to data. I
Right.
think that's what most people are doing. Uh, and now with this new generation of AI powered data security posture management solutions, just a few years ago, it became possible to go deeper and try to understand exactly where all your sensitive data is and who has access to it. Now, because AI is fed with data, very often sensitive data or proprietary data, having good data security as a foundation for your AI security program is an absolute must. So that's where I would start, if that's helpful.
Yeah. Tell me a little more about that. I like how you're positioning data security, but I think a lot of times, sometimes you don't know where that function lives per se, right? Like, does it live within your data group? Does it live within security? Is it like how do you actually structure like a data security program or team?
Yeah, look, I always liked operations, cross-functional operations that include security to live in the security organization. But I agree with you. I think very often it takes like a coalition. So I did this talk last year at a conference called Super Friends, and it was really about building a data security coalition. Because you're right, your chief privacy officer, your chief data officer, your CTO, or your chief compliance officer all have a role to play, and obviously there are other players inside the organization, but those are the most common. They all have a role to play in helping to manage data security risk. And so some organizations, in order to get anything done, require you to bring a coalition of folks together to make that happen. And so I think you're right. It's not uncommon to have broader governance. We see the same trends with AI, right? No one particular organization really owns what AI governance is. So if you bring kind of a coalition of people together who represent different perspectives, different, including, business people, I think you end up having a better program. I don't want to say that's necessarily easier to implement, but the possibilities of building good, lasting governance increases substantially when you have more kind of stakeholders on board. Yeah, so that's a little view. That's how I'm seeing things evolve. People who are successful. There's no one single hero that you can point to. It really requires a collection of really smart, dedicated people who are who have I guess I don't want to say a dog in this fight. That's not right. We're both dog lovers, so but who both are who are all like stakeholders in trying to address and manage data security governance. I think it's important.
That makes sense, right? And one of the biggest questions that we kind of come across, right, with these AI bots, even bot traffic, bot versus human traffic. I'm looking at some of the customers I have, and there's like 80% of traffic is bot traffic.
It's true.
20% is human traffic. And that's realistic. That's not a number that's made up, right?
No, that's been my experience as well. And those people are trying to compromise accounts. And in some cases, look, in our early days, one of the companies that we worked for that was an internet service provider, it was over 90% of authentication attempts were bots. And in some of the streaming services I operated with, our intel told us exactly, lined up with some of the stats that you had, 70, 80%. People trying to compromise accounts, get access to it, sell those accounts, or if you're in other higher risk industries, that could have higher consequences for customers, financial services, for example.
So what do we do? Like everything we build from the internet, like we've been in the internet space. That's how we got started, right? When our careers is the internet. And now, one of the statistics I've heard was AI is growing 16x a year, right? Like that's not double. It's just evolving so quickly. But our security posture, we're still thinking, oh, it's people shopping on the internet. Oh, it's people making transactions, but it's actual technology. So from an AI perspective, the question is when these bots misbehave, right? Who's responsible for that? Is it the person who created the bot? Or are we going to start holding AI responsible for
Yeah, it's
mistakes?
what do we do? Unplug AI when it
Right.
misbehaves? Can't send it to its room. Yeah,
Yeah.
look, it's a really good fundamental question. I think the reality is it's all of us, right? So you have these foundational model vendors who are probably at the forefront trying to think about not just security, but the ethics behind it and how to introduce these challenges. And then they're looking to organizations like Cloud Security Alliance to help their customers learn how to use technology. And Cloud Security Alliance customers are the enterprises, right? How do we teach the enterprises to use the AI more responsibly, more securely, more effectively? And then it comes down to the employees and us as individuals outside of work. How do we train people to use AI more effectively and responsibly? So I think it's a lot of everything. But I'll tell you this: I think what's interesting though is we still have a lot of we have a lot of work to do to educate um, the cybersecurity community. I've noticed CISOs have gotten really smart on AI, and I think CTOs have gotten really smart on AI. I think it's how do you get their teams to be smarter? How do you create bench strength around AI and AI security? How do you create fundamental tools so that we have the ability to address meaningful risks in a meaningful way? I still think there's work to do there. What I'm seeing most security practitioners doing today is just trying to get the right tooling in place to understand how AI is being used in the ecosystem, building some governance, and then leaning into how do I protect these capabilities once I've discovered them. And then it's not, to your point, the adoption rate is so high. I think in 12 months, it'll be hard to buy a SaaS tool that doesn't have an AI component integrated in it, right? And so not only do you have to worry about what people are starting to plug into an environment, you have to also realize and be concerned about what's already plugged in. And somebody can just flip a switch and all of a sudden all that data is being fed into models or used behind the scenes and it's seamless. So this is why, I really practice or really preach data security being the good foundation. Understand and appreciate what has access to your data, what your sensitive data is in your ecosystem. To do that at scale, I think is a great foundation. If you don't do that, then everything you're trying to do around AI security is going to be hampered in a substantial way.
It's very interesting. I really love that approach, right? It's a very fundamental approach from a framework perspective. What I'm kind of thinking about is you talked about data security. I was with a customer, no names, right, this
Mhm.
morning, and they essentially sent out a promotion email. And as part of that promotion email, there was a lot of PII information that was actually revealed. And so there was a call to Akamai, please block this link. We don't want anybody clicking on this, because there's obviously issues. So in that kind of scenario, this is not even AI related. This is just like everyday, hey, please buy our product, right? Kind of email. But that comes back to what you're talking about, data security. Like if they had a good data protection, data security program in place, would that have prevented it? Like does it go back to training the team? Is like, no, you shouldn't be marketing and revealing people's schedules or names or personally identifiable information, right?
I think that's right. Anybody who said they've solved this problem is not being honest, right? And we have to. I always have to constantly remind myself, look, I'm not in the risk prevention business. I'm in the risk management business,
Mm.
and so. And then, how can we learn from these mistakes to be better in the future? How can we learn from other people's mistakes to improve so we don't make those same mistakes? I think that's all part of our responsibility as practitioners. And so, look, I think it's real easy to sit on the sidelines and say that company. I try not to judge, right? Because it's real easy. I think to look at things from the outside. But for those of us who've tried to kind of build
Mm-hmm.
capabilities, it's hard. Look, if it was easy, we all would have done it a long time
Exactly.
ago, and we wouldn't be talking about it right now. But it's really hard. We live in a complicated world. We operate in complicated ecosystems, complicated companies. And can we always do better? Absolutely. And that should be what we strive for.
So how do we go about striving for that? As kind of like we're trying to understand this potential growing threat with AI, right? Constantly scraping information on the internet, potentially getting access to PII information as part of that scraping.
Yeah.
How do we start, like, we talked about, preventing, exposure of, maybe there was a funny use case with one of the customers. They're like, they had a disgruntled employee, and the employee left to go work for a competitor and started using their chatbot, and essentially got the chatbot to say that the competitor's product was better than theirs. Now, and then after that, proceeded to posting it on LinkedIn for everybody to see. Look, even their chatbot knows that their product is not as good.
Sneaky. What a sneaky devil.
Exactly, right? That's and so it becomes more of reputation and brand management at that point, right? Like, if they can't even train their AI chatbot to say that their product is good, are they really that good?
Yeah.
It's an
Well,
interesting problem.
I know. Like it's just like we are saying, it's easy to judge from the outside.
Yeah.
I think, right? And look, I'll tell you, like when I think about how do we build these AI security programs in a way that allows the business to flourish, but also creates this framework that allows us to look our shareholders, look our customers in the eye, and saying we're using this technology responsibly. So here's what I would say. I would say discover, defend, and trust are like three primary absolute, principles. And when I say that, I think we need to embrace. I think that's what responsible AI use looks. I'm not going to talk about the ethics because that'll be 3-hour podcast that we could talk about that. But
Right.
I
Next time.
think from a yeah, next time. We'll do it next time. But I think understanding and knowing where your data is and knowing how well it's protected and who has access to it's a big deal. Understanding what AI you have in your ecosystem and how well that's protected. So I think discovery is pretty important for data and for AI. I don't think you're going to be able to buy a data security posture management solution in 12 months from now that doesn't also include an AI security posture management solution. There might be two modules, but I think they're interrelated. And if people are out there buying AI posture management, AI SPM solutions today, you need to be asking your vendors um, how you can plug your DSPM kind of capabilities into those tools, or what DSPM tools they integrate with if you don't have one, because I think that's
Okay.
foundational. So that's like discover, understanding what you have, what the risk is with what you have, building risk management programs around that, I think is critical. When you start to think about defending, you want to understand and appreciate how to defend data and your AI systems as data moves. Well, data is at rest, or as data moves into and out of those models. So it's that foundational principle: data at rest security, data in motion security. So understanding what has access to what, identity and access management, is, I think, really important. There's this new kind of capability, AI DLP, but that also, like, what has access, what kind of access is moving in, what kind of data is moving into your AI models. The AI DLP, firewalls, AI firewalls, I think are all try to address and manage the same problem. And then look, we're all creating, leveraging other people's models, creating our own agents, leveraging other people's components. So understanding AI model, agent, and supply chain security are really important. That's part of your defensive posture. And then that trust posture is really about, I think, data integrity and provenance, the integrity of data going into the model, the integrity of the data coming out of the model, understand and appreciate how the model is behaving, the observability components of the model, and then model resilience. Because I think over time, we're going to become more and more dependent on these AI capabilities, these AI agents, not only to help us analyze the data we have, but also to take action. So we need to be able to have all those capabilities. We need to understand the ecosystem. We need to discover. We need to defend. We need to trust. Those are the three fundamental principles. And you can map all of those kind of capabilities and the NIST risk management framework, or the CSA management framework. And these concepts that I'm describing, things like resilience and data integrity or provenance, are evolving into the models, into those risk management frameworks. But it's something I think you're going to see more cybersecurity professionals lean into: resilience and data integrity and provenance, observability. Those are elements that aren't traditionally part of application security today, but they will, I think, become more important in the future. This is why having the data security kind of coalition and AI security coalition, I think, is really, really important in trying to understand this kind of very holistic challenge.
Okay. No, that makes start with the fundamentals, right? And really look at your data and how it's traveling or if it's addressed. And then you can, but it's also this, let's talk about like most companies, right? They're relying on the big models, right? The Geminis, the OpenAI is one of the bigger ones, right? Claude. And there's really, I mean, obviously Meta has more of an open model that they've created, but all of them have risks. And you don't, how do you, you could have an instance, but like, is that where you're looking at transparency? In, talk me through it. I guess that's the part maybe I don't understand completely is if you're relying
Yeah,
on the LLM to build out your chatbot or an internal tool, how do you manage that transparency risk?
yeah, yeah, it's a good question. Look, I think 99% of people who are using AI today in the enterprises are either using chatbots, third-party tools, or building their own AI agents and applications on top of somebody else's LLMs or development capabilities. That's 99%. Very few people are building their own LLMs at this point, right? From my conversations. And so you're right. What do you do? I think the first thing you have to understand and appreciate, this is where discovery becomes really important. And this is where not just AI discovery, but data discovery becomes really important. Because the first time I did a discovery assessment, there were already 60 AI tools plugged into my ecosystem. And this was about a year and a half ago. And then I was like, oh my God, what I realized is they weren't all equal. 98% of the overall usage was in Bedrock. So I said, okay, because I know that's going to change, right? We're
Yeah.
starting to adapt. We're getting more SaaS-based tools, but right now, Bedrock is where most of our AI and custom applications are using Bedrock inside this ecosystem. What do I do? We created good minimum security standards around how to use Bedrock, how to configure your instance of Bedrock. And you think about it, you fast forward a year and a half later, there's even more information about how to configure and use those kind of capabilities and tools safely. Again, we're in the risk management business. We're not in the risk prevention business. And so you might do a vendor security review on Amazon Bedrock. You might do other things to help you get more comfortable about using these capabilities and tools. If you start at the top, the other thing that we realized when we started to evaluate data security risk is 80% of our PI was located in 1,000 data stores. And so all of a sudden, you could address 80% of your risk by making sure that in this particular case, we had hundreds of thousands of data stores. I cared most about the top 5% of those data stores because they had 80% of the data. So all of a sudden, it became really manageable. It went from like, I think data is really important. Having an understanding, using data to understand your risk, I think is probably underappreciated in the community. But all of a sudden, the problem goes from this to this. It goes from a huge problem that's insurmountable to a problem I can manage over time. And I think understanding and appreciating AI, you can't solve all the AI problems, but if you understand how AI is being used in your ecosystem, what true risk it presents to your enterprise, then you can build strategies around it. And maybe you can only do, 5 or 10 things, 5 or 10 initiatives in a year around AI. And those could be, some are small, most are small, a couple are big ones. What are those 5 or 10 things you need to do? Um, and again, in the risk management business, we're not in the risk prevention business. So I think those type of concepts and ideas help make what seems impossible possible.
I really love that approach because you're really looking at, and people are always afraid to start with the discovery. It's almost they're scared what they're gonna see, and it's just like it's the most important step. It's until you ask the questions, how do you know how you're gonna address the problem, right? You don't really know what you're dealing with.
I think you and I get it because we've been there before, right? Like you already have too many more problems than you have, hours to solve, right? You have more work than you have labor. But the reality is, I think ignorance is not bliss in cybersecurity, right? And I remember, like when I first started, people would say, "I don't want to do discovery because if I know about it, then I'm liable for it." You're liable for it anyway,
Anyway,
right?
yeah, might as well do it.
Yeah, that's right. Isn't it worse not to know than it is to know and to raise your hand and say, "Look, we've got this problem over here." I remember going to several boards and saying, "Look, I'm, I've done all this great stuff, right? The question is, you don't want to know like how great I'm doing. You want to know what I'm missing." So I try to be pretty transparent with the boards. You don't get hours in front of the boards. You very often you get minutes in front of the board. So you want the board to understand. I think that this is why I have confidence in these other areas. Here's what I'm watching, kind of maintain my confidence. And then here's some other emerging areas that I want to dig into. I remember going to, when we started our data security journey, I remember going to the board and saying, look, we have X number, hundreds of thousands of data stores, and I want to be able to come back to you and tell you, how much sensitive data we have and how well it's protected. I think that's important. What do you think? Right? And they're like, absolutely. And I said, look, I don't, 5 years ago, I don't think the technology existed. 2 years ago, the technology existed. And this is me a couple of years ago. But the technology exists today. I think I could do that. And I'm going to come back in 6 months and give you an update. I haven't solved it yet, but I'm going to at least come back and tell you like how we're doing and then what I'm going to do to make it better. And, I was lucky. I came back in 3 months with an interim update because we implemented a data security posture management solution that was seamless and well integrated and agentless and, the doors off my expectations. And, and that was a huge lift to the program. We did a lot to manage risk in that area because we understood the problem. And then as AI capabilities involved in our ecosystem, we had a really good data security foundation to pivot into AI. I wish everybody had that. I think many CISOs and security programs are still catching up on data security. Anyway, I'd rather know. Ignorance is not bliss in our world.
It is not. And I feel like sometimes even with the firewalls, right, for AI, we're fixing the symptoms. We're not really fixing the problems. What you're talking about is like if you understand your risk with your data security posture, you're at that foundational level. You know exactly where everything is, right? You're not just like a headache could be a symptom, but it's not maybe the main problem of where your risk exists in your enterprise kind of thing.
I
Yeah.
think so. I think you're fighting a fight with one hand tied behind your back.
Yeah. Um, that you know I'm glad so I hope people connect with you on LinkedIn, Pete, and listen to some of the talks you've done and the frameworks you're creating. I think it's so important, to your point, to just like go back to the basics because we are managing unprecedented, I think, levels of risk right now. Some risk that we've never in our human history have had to address, right? And data, it starts at the data and that foundational level. So pretty
I
impressive.
agree.
Yeah.
Thanks, Vicky.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Yeah. Thanks for coming. Talk to you soon.
Take care.